and they grab a hold of and help pull somebody out of, right? And what is it that this person needs? They typically need more friends to go with them, right? Does anybody here work in like maybe an urban context in one of the downtown rescue missions or any place that's there? Anybody here? Anybody work in like a pregnancy center? Anybody work here at all? Anybody alive here at all? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Just checking the pulse rate. I don't know if you find this, but most of the leaders within the church are like, you know what we need? We just need more of these people to go into this place. These issues are not solving themselves, and so we need more disciples who will go to these places and say, let's do something about that. And typically, those group of people are found in a church, right? A church is a place of where a group of disciples come together and they say, hey, let's together be about helping redeem this world through the power of Jesus Christ, and we will be those agents of change, and we will go, and we will do something about that. But the problem is there's typically not enough of those to take care of this, right? I mean, that's really what is kind of the gap. It's kind of a statement of saying, we not only need this church, but we need other churches to lock arms and do something about it. I don't know if you've heard about some of the initiatives, like in the city that I live in, there's a major initiative to make Kansas City an orphan-free city. That they want everybody in a church, somewhere in that community, to know that we want to be able to do something about this. And they're hoping that one person in that community would be an adoptive parent. And what they know is that if every church had one person that would adopt a child out of foster care, do you know how many foster kids there would be in Kansas City in a year? 0. Right? They're saying we just need more. And for me, the reason in which we want to help and see churches being planted is because of this. Because it's not that old churches are bad and new churches are good. It's just that we need more churches. Can I get a right on that one? Does that make sense? Do you see that it's really not about, hey, these are bad, these are good. These are irrelevant, these are cutting edge. These are where it's not happening, these are where it is happening. No, it's a matter of this world needs Jesus Christ so deeply, so badly, so passionately that we just need more people who will raise up those crazy disciples to go out there and make a difference. Those crazy urban missionaries that are growing them up to be followers of Jesus, to say, hey, let's bring hope. Let's bring somebody out. You feel me? Does that make sense? Sometimes people worry about new churches being kind of in spots, and they worry about, hey, this is too close to this one, or it's, should be over here. But for me, just so you guys know, that roughly in the Lincoln, Omaha, Council Bluffs area, there are about 1 million people. And roughly last week, 81 to 82%, somewhere in between there, of those people did not attend a church of any kind. Not like a life-giving church, not like a church that really loves Jesus, but we're just talking to somebody that's like 2 out of 3 weeks can point to the Bible and be like, yeah, I kind of like that thing. A church of any kind. So the question isn't bad or good. The question is, how can we get more? You feel me? Does that make sense? Did you know that in the United States, here I'm going to roll off some stats for you too. In this United States, there are alone over 130 million people who have no connection to a local church, making it the largest mission field in the Western Hemisphere, and possibly the somewhere between the 5th and the 7th largest mission field in the entire world. It depends on how you kind of track some of the numbers. In the United States, there are over 337 languages that are spoken, making the U.S. one of the most multicultural and multilingual nations on earth. In the United States, they're projecting that in 2020, 14.7% of the population will attend church on any given Sunday. Do you know how many times the average church attender goes to church? Like somebody that's like completely committed, they're like into it, they're like, yes, this is my church home. Do you know what the average church attendance is for them in a month? Once? Somebody else? Guess? Twice? Twice? We got two? 1.9 times. Church pastors refer to it as preaching to the parade. Did you know that half of all churches last year did not add one new member through conversion growth last year? There are roughly somewhere between plus or minus about 320,000 churches in the United States today. And every year, roughly about 4,000 of those churches will close their doors for the very last time. The average church size in America is, anybody know? 75. 2% of churches have an attendance of 1,000 or more, and there are roughly about 72 gigachurches, those being churches of 10,000 or more in attendance. And so the question isn't bad or good, it's about more. You feel me? It's about more. More. Can I get a right on that one? Right on. All right. My excellent artwork will be all day. Just prepare for the awesomeness that it is. So the question becomes, now we know why we need them. And if somebody ever asks you, why should we plant a church, draw a little figure like that up there. And you'll remember it. You will. You'll remember it. You'll start drawing those little things and start scribbling all over it and be like, we need more. So we know why. So the question that often people ask is about, then, well, how? How do we get them? Has anybody here ever been a part of a church plant? A new one? A couple of you. Right on. People say, well, how do you do this? You know, I meet people on an airplane or something like that, and they look at you and they're like, hey, tell me what you do. And I'm like, well, we help start churches in different places all over the country and even somewhat in some other Latin American countries and help them do that stuff. And they look at me like, you got 4 eyes, and they're like, what are you talking about? And then you try to share with them a little bit about it. And they're really asking the kind of this question of, like, how do you do that? How does it start? Because most people believe that a new church is someplace where, where's your building, right? It's like, where's the building at? That's the church. What we know is that God typically develops new churches in kind of one of three ways, and I kind of draw it this way. There are some times in which God just decides that he wants to start a new church, a new group of believers, just because he kind of wants to. And sometimes it's in some of the craziest ways. There was a dentist in Illinois that one time decided that he wanted to help his friends come to know Christ. And so he asked another church if he could show their videos of the church at service that they had at his town and be able to do that. And now there's like over 6,000 people that are a part of that church. Like a dentist. Like video. There's some times of where God uses the gifting of kind of a key leader in a pretty crazy, special way. There was a guy that I knew in California that literally started their church by going to the beach like 3 to 4 days a week and working on a message at the beach. And then he went and he found a place like a movie theater, and then they like opened the doors and they had church. They didn't have like small groups, they didn't have like other ministries or anything else. It was just kind of like that. And he was an unbelievably gifted communicator. And that church now is like 6,000 people. It's crazy. But sometimes he uses the gifts of somebody. I refer to those people as like the freaks, Like they have some freakish gift, They're those people that you can't figure it out, but it's just something that God's given them to use in a special way. And the third way is the way in which typically we have to rely upon helping start new churches is through the wisdom of those who have gone before us. In Proverbs David talks about the young man that's traveling along this journey, and he looks down from an upper position, and he says to the young man, what does he say? Don't go that way, right? Has anybody read the Bible here? Anybody read the Bible? Thank you. Have you heard of the story? Thank you very much. Have you heard of the story? Okay, good. And so he's looking at this guy, this young man that's traveled along the story, and David is saying, hey, stop it. Don't go that direction. Why? 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 Bad stuff is going to happen. He's like, hey, stop it. Don't go that way. Can you see that the bridge is out? Can you see that this is happening? And it's probably because of one of two things. One, it could be his vantage point that he has to be able to see this journey. But the other one could be because he's traveled the road himself and he knows. And he's kind of stepped in it himself and realized, hey, I gotta help somebody else out. Well, what we know specifically probably about the last 40 years or so in which new churches have started, that we've started to learn a lot of things. When new churches kind of started first getting kind of rolled out in this way, kind of in our generations, it's always been happening from Paul in throughout the 1800s, 1700s, throughout history it's always happened. But in literally the last 40 years or so, people have started asking some questions about how is it done and how is it done well? And at this time, really back in the 80s, somewhere around in there, we realized that roughly about 1 out of every 10 new churches lasted 3 years or more. And that was a failure rate of what? 90%. New businesses also fail at that same rate. I don't know if you know this. New businesses across the board have a failure rate typically of 9 out of 10 within the first 3 years will close their doors. And the church, kind of as it was getting started kind of through the 70s into the 80s, kind of on into the 90s even a little bit, that had the same failure rate. So if you would go and start a new church, in 3 years, you would not be alive still. That was it. Doors would be closed. Have a sign out front that said, sorry, we don't meet here anymore. And so people started asking some questions, and they said, well, what is it that makes it where this one is different? How are they different? And they begin to ask those questions, which I refer to as wisdom, right? It's asking great questions like, hey, how come you're still alive? That's a really good question, right? How come you guys have made it? How come you guys have done something when others haven't? And so they began to study those. And they started asking the question of, okay, what is different typically about that leader? What makes them unique? How do they know something or do something that others don't? What can we learn from them? And they started tracking that there were some unique aptitudes or things that they learned about them. And so here's what we're going to do. At your table, I want to ask you to do this. At your table, I want you to think of what are the 5 most important things that a new church pastor, let's call him a church planter, should have to plant a church that would make it. Okay? So here's a question again. What would be the top 5 attributes, gifts, behaviors, whatever you want to say, are necessary in that leader for it to be a church that sustains and prevails? You feel me? All right. You got 5 minutes or less at your table. I want your top 5. You got to rank them too. Top 5. Ready? Go. Play some music. Just a little thing. Give me this. Top 5. How we doing? Got it? Keep going. I'll give you one more minute, okay? One more minute. You got to rank them. Got to rank them. Got them? All right, pencils down. Here we go. We're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so here's what I need you to do. I need somebody at your table to stand up and tell us your list of 5 really loudly, okay? Put them in the order that you have. Top 5 stand at your table. We're going to start with you guys right over here, okay? If you guys will start here. So your top 5, everybody, shh, pay attention to greatness right over here. Yes.
Test.
Strong will. And what was the other one before that? Wise. Right on. All right, everybody give it up for her. Right on. Come on, a little ripple. All right, group back here. Yep. Group back here. Somebody stand and do it. Somebody stand and do it. Come on, somebody be a leader. Let's go.
Okay.
Ooh.
We have number 1, rooted in Christ, grace, compassion, zeal, and leadership.
Grace, compassion, zeal,
Yep.
leadership.
Yep.
You realize that's only 4.
Rooted in Christ is the first one.
What was the first one?
Rooted in
Root.
Christ.
Dude, only one word. But
Rooted.
that's okay. Okay, rooted.
Rooted is the word.
Rooted. Right on. Okay, let's give him a little hand right over there. Excellent job. Come on. All right, back here. Tell us your name and your favorite sin. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Okay, or just the list, either one. Just tell us your list. Okay.
All right. We have closeness to God.
Closeness. Did you say closeness to God?
Yes.
Okay.
Commitment, accountability, relational, and wisdom.
Relational, wisdom. What else was the other one? Accountability. Okay. Right on. Give it up for him. Right on. Excellent. Okay. Right here, this group. Right here. Microphone lady.
Okay. Relational, outreach, biblical truth / knowledge, humility, and goal-oriented.
Goal-oriented. Okay, good. Good enough. Right on. Let's give them a little hand. Okay. They're terrible clappers for you, but you did a great job. Okay. So it's all right. We don't need that. Have that removed right there.
All right, we had solid relationship with Christ, vision, love or commitment for the community, a good staff, and then creativity.
Good. Right on. Back there, give them a little ripple. Okay. We'll go with this group back here. Let's do this group back here first.
We have guided by the Holy Spirit, inspiring to others, loving people, hardworking, and engaging.
Good. Right on. Give them a little some. Thank you. Exactly.
Okay, first one is commitment to Jesus, relational, determination, ability to delegate and grow leaders, humility. That's 5.
Right on. Good. Excellent. Right over here, this group.
All right, our first one we have relational. Second one is visionary. Third is strategic mind. Fourth is team builder or activator. And the fifth one is self-management.
What was the last one?
Self-management.
Self-management. Okay. Right on. Last group. Excellent job. Excellent job. So this is a great list. This is a lot of very good lists, a lot of very good things on this list. And in fact, there was a man by the name of Dr. Charles Ridley who said, you know what? We need to make a list about those characteristics, because what they found out was that really the single most important decision that will ever go into the life of a new church is who will be their leader. That was the most important thing. They're like, that leader dictates the future of this church so much more than facilities or money or the people who would come around them maybe in the initial spots, but really who that leader was became the single most important factor in determining, hey, would that church still be around after 3 years? And so he did a study out of the University of Indiana across multiple denominational lines, and he asked that very question. And what they found out there were 53 different attributes or competencies they found out. And then they shortened that to a group of about 13. Grab the sheet of paper in front of you, and you'll see Dr. Ridley's information there. Share those around. And we're going to do a little feedback here too, okay? We're going to be a little feedback here of the list that he found out after studying literally hundreds of church planters that were successful. And their bar of success was what? They were still alive after 3 years. We're not talking they became a mega church or they became like the greatest thing since sliced bread, but no, just were they literally alive after 3 years. And this is what he found out. He determined, after studying this and applying the wisdom that we talked about earlier, he found out that the number one characteristic needed in that visionary point leader, we'll call him that church planting pastor, the single most important thing was what? Visionizing capacity. Let's read it. Projects in the future beyond the present, develops a theme that highlights the vision and philosophy of ministry, persuasively sells the vision to people, approaches challenges as opportunities instead of obstacles, copes effectively with non-visionizing people, does not erect artificial walls to limit the capacity, and believes in God's capacity to accomplish great things. So my question to you is, why would this be the most important thing? What do you think? Yeah, jump in. Right on. Good. What else? Come on. Let's go. You got nothing. Yeah, you move in next door to somebody and they say, hey, what are you? Well, I'm a pastor of a new church. What do they ask you? Where's your church? Well, it's right here. it's a dream. It's a vision. What else? Come on. What else? Why is this the single most important thing? Yes. Jump in. Good. What else? Come on. Yeah, you got to cast a vision that other people want to be a part of, right? Because if you got nothing, you got to have something eventually, right? Okay. Number 2, intrinsically motivated. He determined that this was the second most significant thing. And in fact, they tell us that if the top 5 aren't there, they call those the knockout factors. That there's almost really very little chance that church will be successful. And what again was the measure of success? They were still alive after 3 years. So the bar wasn't even really that high. He said they have to have a commitment to excellence, stick-to-itiveness, persistence, aggressively yet possibly taking initiative. They're self-starters. They're willing to build from nothing. They're willing to work long and hard. He said you have to be intrinsically motivated. Why do you think that would be important? Come on. If you haven't spoken, I want to hear from you. Come on. This table back here, come on. Come on. What do you got? Why? Yeah. What else? Nobody's going to get you out of bed, right? Yeah. What else? Typically, your first office when you start a new church is a card table in your bedroom. And there's nobody that's like saying, hey, Johnny, get up and go to work, right? Yeah. What else? Number 3, creates ownership of ministry. Helps others buy in and feel responsible for the growth and success of the ministry. Wins the commitment of the people to the vision. Establishes congregational identity. Avoids imposing unrealistic goals on the congregation. Why did he figure out that this was the third most significant thing? This table right back here, I'm asking you first. Why? Why? Okay, we're coming back to you. This table right here, why? Great. I'm coming back to this table. Why? Yeah. Yeah, is it just your crazy idea or are other people going to be a part of this as well? Is this a group of people? What else? What else? Yeah, exactly. Number 4, spousal cooperation. This is interesting. Has an explicit agreement regarding each partner's role and involvement in ministry. Evaluates the consequences, functions as a team, models wholesome family life, agrees upon shared ministry vision with spouse, deliberately plans and protects family time. Why would this be important in the development of new church? Yeah, yeah. Sometimes the first place that you meet is in your home, and so like, how do you do that? What else? Right on. Tell me how good your church is going to be if you just got divorced 3 weeks before it opens. Probably not very good, right? What else? Right. For me, I think that most people that don't go to church ask 2 questions whenever they meet somebody that's a Christ follower. I think the first question that they ask, maybe not out loud, but intuitively, is, do I like you? And the second question I think they ask is, do I want to be like you? And if your marriage as a lead pastor or your family is garbage, your kids are crazy, your family's a mess, what is it that you do? You're giving a great big advertisement of, hey, this is not really a good thing to do, right? Yeah. Number 5, reaches the unchurched community. Vince probably talked to you guys a ton about this. So significant. Number 6, effectively builds relationships. Number 7, commitment to church growth. Number 8, responsive to the community. Number 9, utilizes the giftedness of others. Number 10, flexible and adaptable. Number 11, builds a cohesive church body. Number 12, demonstrates resilience. And number 13, exercises faith. On number 13, or number 12, somebody was talking about grit back here. How many know the term grit? You guys ever talk about the term grit? The grit is like somebody that's going to stick with something, no matter what. One of my church planting heroes is a guy by the name of Brent Folk. Brent Folk is somebody who I get to work with and who left the church back in the 80s, I believe it was, out of Florida to move to Albany, New York, one of the least churched places in the United States, to help start a new church. And I don't know if you've ever been to Albany, but it's cold there, like all the time, right? Like if I think of the word suck, I think of Albany. You know, like that's what it is. It's like cold all the time, and it's like dark in the wintertime. And for their new church, they were so committed to that church, but very few of the people that were coming into this new church had the ability to sustain it and even pay for it. And so they determined as a family and as a leader of that family that they would throw newspapers to help supplement the income of their family to be able to do this. And so every morning for 10 years, they would get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and they would load up their minivan, and they would go out and throw papers. How cold do you think it would be in Albany, New York at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday before you got to go preach? You feel me? That's what he's talking about here. Resiliency. So here's a quick thing that I want to do, and then we're going to do just a little bit of time here with the two of us, with Andy and I. I would like you to take this sheet of paper, and I would like you to rank yourself on these categories. Now hold on, stay with me just for 1 second. There's a lot of times in which people say, yeah, somebody should start a new church, and I agree with them. But sometimes the question is, am I the best person to lead that new church? Maybe I should be a teammate. Maybe I should help champion it. But to be a visionary point leader, these are some of the things that from wisdom's years we've learned that are significant over no matter what your grandma says about you, no matter what you think about yourself when you look in the mirror and how beautiful you are. Dr. Ridley started saying, well, no, these things kind of need to be a part of who you are. And you're young, of where it's not going to be fully baked, but there are some of these that are really more about who you are on the inside, deep, of where you kind of have an idea. And so here's a question. We're going to go 0 to 5. 5 being, yeah, I think I got that one knocked out. If Jesus ever needs somebody in this category, look me up, brothers. I am there. And 0 being, I am awful, I am less than awful, I am 0, I'm awful. Now, I imagine that most of us are not going to be that or number 5. But here's what I want you to do. I would like you to just quickly, kind of gut instinct, go through and just give yourself a rating on these things. Take a pen, take a piece of paper, just be like, hey, this is a little bit of who I am. Maybe identifying, hey, here are some things that maybe I need to work on. Or here are some things that need to be developed in here. But I'm going to give you 1 minute. Gut instinct, 0 through 5. Just hit the high categories. Visionizing capacity. How good am I at that? What does that look like? If you don't have a pen, borrow somebody else's pen. They'll share with you. They're at a Christian college. If they don't, we'll take away their scholarship. Go ahead. They'll share. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right on. Take another 30 seconds. Just kind of go, gut instinct, where you're at. It's not something you have to ponder too long. Just be like, hey, how do I do at this? Is this something God's put inside of me? Is this something I'm good at? Is this something I'm not good at? Maybe it's something you need to develop in, but what do you think? All right. Take another 20 seconds. And then we'll turn it over to you. Then you can take it from there. All right.
So here's what I want. Here's what I'm curious about now. As I go through and I look at these things, it's kind of a long list, right?
It's better than the 53.
It's better than 53.
Right.
But I want to know, Justin, can these be developed in you? Like, say you scored a 2s and 3s on most of these, but you're thinking, well, I'll probably never be a church planner. I mean, can these be developed in people? How do you go about finding out if people have what it takes to do this?
Yeah, great question. So the answer is yes, that a lot of these are areas that can be developed. But some of them, that maybe this is an area that I'm just maybe not wired up. There's some that you can develop, and there's some that are more intrinsic to that. But that's why I hope that this is kind of a little bit of a list for you to be thinking about in ministry. Be like, hey, if this is something that's important in the kingdom, then maybe that's something I can grow in, which I think you can.
So then, how do you assess folks on these and make sure, hey, you're ready to go plant a church or not? I mean, there's got to be some kind of process you go through, right?
Yeah. So what we do is we walk alongside people that are typically after about 5, maybe 7, 10 years of ministry that have had some experience. We walk them through a process that kind of begins to ask the question of, hey, how has God wired you up to plant a church? Should you be that visionary point leader? Should you be a part of a team? Or should you be a champion of it? And we help walk them through that through an assessment process, through a discovery process, and it's pretty lengthy.
Because sometimes I hear students say, yeah, I want to go plant a church, and I'm thinking to myself, I hope you do someday, but
Right.
maybe not right away. So you're saying 5 to 7 years. if you were to be intentional over those 5 to 7 years, you graduate from college, you've got 7 years to get ready to plant a church. Like, what kind of experiences should you go through or attempt to do in order to find out and / prepare yourself if you're going to do this or not?
Right on. So if this is kind of a little bit of the old man now of me, and my kids are about you guys' age, I would say the most significant thing to do right out of college is to go and be a part of a healthy church ministry. Wherever it is, whatever it does, that you look at the lead pastor and their spouse, and you can say to yourself, I want to be like them. And you go to a healthy place like that. And then you get a chance to do ministry and try ministry and get beat up a little bit and have success and figure a few things out. Because the last thing that anybody would want is for somebody to be trying to figure it out when it's a moment of where it's brand new for everybody. And there's some safe places for all of us to be able to figure some things out and to start there and to grow and mature and to be able to kind of do that self-leadership, then group leadership, then team leadership, and then maybe church leadership.
Yeah, if it takes that much resiliency, right, to do a church plant, you better find out if you have what it takes just to be on a team somewhere first
Yeah.
for a while, right? And learn about what's going to take, what are the hardest parts about it, and how to avoid those things, just grow a little bit. It's good.
And with that, even just, I say this all the time, people who help start new churches don't get to stand in the front of line to go to heaven. We're all servants of the King. And with that, the question is, where is it that your gifts can be best utilized for the kingdom? And whether that's in this, which is pretty specific, or maybe it's in another area that's very specific.
So that kind of makes me think, okay, some people, we use the word calling, and
Yep.
we really believe in that.
Yep.
But maybe you have people come to you and say, yeah, I really feel called to plant a church. And so there's a sense of that. You don't want to squash that, but
No.
you've also got to say, okay, there's some things you need to be good at. There's some characteristics you need.
Yep.
So then you have to go kind of maybe help them assess and see if that's the thing. Maybe they're the gifted person, that's just going to get it done no matter what. God,
Totally.
How often does that happen? Would you say what percentage of the time is it a gifted person, and that thing succeeds and makes it?
Let me back up and
Yeah.
talk about some of the first things. There's a difference between a calling and a burden for something. Where I hope we are all burdened for the lost, but not maybe everybody should serve in kind of specific ways. And with that, the other thing about calling is, Paul talks about this, about being called by God and affirmed by man, that there's both a vertical and a horizontal movement of that. And even thinking about Moses' calling, or who, throughout Scripture, the different ways. Moses' calling was 40 years before it was realized. And so that process is typically around where other godly people are going, yeah, I see that in you. Man, I believe in that. Yes, that's right. Which is different than oftentimes like your grandma. Like my standard response is that my grandmother, if I told my grandma, I think I want to play in the NBA. My grandma was 96 years old. She passed away a couple months ago. If I would have told her that, my grandma would have said, Justin, you can do it. You can do it. I believe in you. You can do it. I know you're 47 years old, and you could do it. Now, my college coach thought otherwise. We kind of need both people in our lives sometimes for that. And I think that's the balance of calling. And we refer to it as kind of three things. There's a calling aspect. There are certain attributes that are required. And then there's a question of readiness. Maybe I might have those aptitudes and those things, those attributes, but I might not be ready. And so there's a season of development that I need.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, how much does, because you said there's a difference between a church that's just being a church and a church that's reaching lost people, advancing the kingdom.
Sure.
How much does that, love for lost people and wanting to see them, meet Christ versus, get believers together?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how does that part work? Because I honestly, I struggle with that part, right? I'm like the guy who's like, yeah, I mean, if they come in here, great, and let's do church, but if I'm honest, I'm not that great at reaching out and wanting to, meet people who don't know Jesus. How much of a factor is that, and how do we develop that or assess for that in our own life?
I think that's a great question, and I think that the reason why in which we start new churches is to help reach those who have not been reached, rather than just to give people a new option that they could go to. And so I think that that's hugely important. And I think one of the big questions that we ask, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier, about like my buddy Vince talking about that to you guys earlier, just the necessity of being around people that don't know Christ and being a part of their lives. It's there. With church planters, I'll give you a little tip here, okay? So we interview literally a few hundred a year. I shouldn't say a month, a year. And one of the questions that I ask is, if you were to put a tic-tac-toe board around your house and you're in the middle of it, can you tell me your neighbors' names and their spiritual stories? And if you can't, then that tells me a little bit about you. Do you have any relationships with unchurched people? You know, and then the follow-up question is, have you done anything to help them along their spiritual journey?
Sure.
And if you haven't, then, okay, maybe this is not the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good question. So tell us a little bit about, so say you got a guy, you got a girl, somebody who's going to go do this. They've assessed well, they're ready, they're called, they got the aptitudes, whatever the third thing was you said.
Readiness.
Readiness, they're ready.
Right on.
Now what? What's the next thing in the process to get this thing going?
Yeah, that's a completely different set of things where we think that it requires a lot of relationships and scaffolding and people of expertise that could come alongside and help with the other things that are significant. Number one, the leader. Number two, the finances necessary. And number three, the support structure around them for their spouse, for them as leaders, coaching, training, project management, all kinds of stuff to provide what I kind of refer to as scaffolding as that new church kind of gets off the ground.
And so if there's a church that, when you've seen it go the best, what's working correctly right away? I mean, can you is that a fair question, or is it different every single time, or?
I think it's different, but I think it's the person who might move into a new neighborhood that throws a party as they're unloading the boxes. Because they want to be there to help people come to know Christ. And it's not about even their immediate needs. It's about how that they can connect with people there and help them and grow with them. It's about that right leader that's doing it. It's about people around them that support them and be like, yeah, I've seen this in you for years, and I affirm this, and you can do it. And we're going to give you our hearts and our prayers and even our resources because we believe in you to do it. Those are people that typically feels like that we've done all we can.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anybody else questions for this guy? He's got a wealth of knowledge. You're thinking, oh yeah, but, or I was thinking I wanted to plant a church. I want to do this. What maybe anybody who maybe I know there's some church planters in the room.
This table over here asks lots of great questions.
Yeah,
this group
good.
right here,
Yeah.
they do lots of great questions.
Well, just go ahead whenever you got one, Brittany. Stand up and say
I was
something.
harassing them earlier, so that's why.
Sorry to call you out.
No.
Anyone else? Seriously? Anybody else? No? Yeah. The question is, what's the biggest bottleneck to starting churches? Because obviously there's a big need.
I would say it's two things. Number one, helping identify the right leader and helping them be as prepared as possible. Never perfect, but as prepared as possible. And secondly, I think the community of faith, churches, to say, we know that new has to happen, and so we'll stand ready. We'll stand there to begin with from the very beginning. It's kind of like a junior high dance, sometimes I refer to. It's like a junior high dance basically is awful. Everybody lives over at the sides. The girls are on one side, the boys are on one side. And the only thing that changes it is when somebody wants to dance. And that's the way it is in church planting. It's like, man, somebody's got to get out there and dance, and then others. And so we need churches, communities of faith to be able to let's dance. Let's do something here in our community.
So it's most often around other churches helping
churches and
send somebody,
and those
send
leaders.
People. Yeah,
both
yeah.
and.
Right on. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question is why Stadia? Why do you do why do it through you guys? Why do you believe this is the way to do it?
We don't think we're perfect. I hope that we just have asked enough questions over the years to allow wisdom to move forward. Over 90% of the churches that we help are still actively engaged in their mission after 5 years, versus kind of some of those other statistics that we talked about. Those were a long time ago. Now it's about 50 to 60% of churches last. But I hope that it's because we've allowed other generations before us that have failed in small ways or big ways, that we just write them down and be like, hey, cheat off of me. Don't do that. Don't do that. So that's my hope. Thanks.
Yeah. Say a little bit. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's that?
Interview about 100 a year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so let me back you up. So there are over 600 typical people will start a process with us to say, should I plant a church? And we walk them through multiple layers of that just to help them learn as much as anybody else. It's not like a pass-fail. It's really about, how has God wired you up the best? What is it that you should be doing? And how can we help you in that? And I like to respond, but it's like, I can't fire anybody. I can't hire anybody. I can't take away anybody's credentials or ordination. We can only do our best to help them on behalf of the kingdom. And with that, then we walk them through this discovery process. And right now, about 1 out of every 10 or so that begin that process will plant a church. Some of those might plant a church beyond that later on, of where that readiness factor, of where there's some things that might help them to get ready, and so they might go out later. And so right now, it's about that.
Is there one thing that you say that you see the most for readiness? That's they're not ready because.
Good question. I'll give you a few.
Okay.
Engagement with unchurched people.
Yeah.
The ability to develop teams.
Yeah.
The ability to start something out of nothing. So if anybody here wants to plant a church, here's the litmus test that you can use. When you have an apartment or something one day, or a townhouse or a house, start a small group of people in your neighborhood from people that don't go to church, and then multiply that group. That's what church planning is all about. And so most people don't have an engagement with unchurched people, don't have the ability to start something from nothing. And so those are things that they've got to work at to get ready.
Yeah, that's really good. Adam.
So it's good. It's a good question.
Yeah, what's the actual mode of operation that you go through? What's the test? Is there a functional thing that you use?
So we use a lot of different tools to ask those questions. And for us, it's not a test, and I don't think you meant it in that way, but it's really more of what we would call the discovery process. It'd be like, okay, hey, let's help put a mirror up for you so that you can learn about you. And it's not about this role you didn't pass or fail for. But how did God wire you up? What are you most gifted to do? How can you do that? And does that then line up with how God typically has used people, crazy people, to start new churches? And if so, right on. But if not, hey, maybe where's another spot in the kingdom that you fit better? And for us just doing our best to help you along that. Because there's nothing worse than being in a spot where you're like, ooh, I don't fit. This is not good. Because there's usually a lot of pain in that. You know, there's some people that communication, like preaching, it's like it's not their gifting, it's not their thing. It might be what they always saw somebody do, but it's just something that kills them. And you know when they know? Saturday night or Sunday morning when they're about ready to stand up and give a message and they're like, this is awful, I hate myself, my gut's hurt. And you're like, bro, maybe there's a different spot that would be better so that you don't wake up every Sunday morning and go, I hate myself, this is awful. Does that make sense? Yeah.
What do you do for folks who find out, in the discovery process, this probably isn't me? Mm-hmm. Is there anything else? How do you steer them? Are they already typically in a church? They just need to keep doing what they're doing? Or
a lot of folks are in a church.
Yeah.
Most folks are in a church. Some are in great churches, and they're working maybe in an outside career, and they're thinking about ministry. A lot of times in the church, we don't tell the truth to each other about our gifts. I don't know how many people said to me after I preached some of my first messages, that was awesome. And you're like,
Yeah.
no, that wasn't. That was awful. And I know it, and so hopefully it's just, again, it's that mirror to be able to do our best to say, hey man, this is how God's wired you. How can you rock in that area? Or how can you be involved in that thing? So
Along those lines, real
Yeah.
quick, because this is the thing I'm probably the most passionate about, and what I'd probably try to help coach folks who have our students do a lot is,
Right
to,
on.
is to have an honest conversation like
Mm.
that. Give the students a question to go ask, where they're serving, their supervisor, their coach. What do you go? How should you go approach them and ask them, for development? You know what I mean? Or what's the question? What's a good question to find out how good you're doing, or if you have this characteristic or anything like that? Is there anything you've got there?
I would write somebody an email and I would say, may I have 30 minutes of your time? And I want to ask you two questions. Number one, what are some areas in my life that you see that might be strengths that I really need to develop more? And then what are some areas of gaps that I need to be aware of or to start working on?
Yeah.
Can I meet with you for 30 minutes and can you answer those two questions? And I promise to take notes. I think that's killer.
And then, because we're, as church leaders especially, we're nice people, we're pastoral, we don't want to hurt people's feelings, we like being liked, and that doesn't
Right.
feel like a good thing to do if you want to be liked.
Right.
After you get done with that, I would say, ask again, what's the last 10% that you didn't tell me,
Great.
right? Because
follow-up.
we're tempted to just not say the hardest part, but that's
Yep.
where you grow the most,
Right on.
right? And so we've got to do that. Anybody else? Last question, last chance here. Yeah, Dylan. Best practices for international church planting.
Yeah, I'm be very honest. That's probably outside of my wheelhouse, and anything I would give you would be my opinion, and that probably wouldn't be very helpful. I think there's probably better people to respond to you in that, and I mean, I don't think I have anything to help you with, brother. Sorry. Yeah.
Should be honest.
I wanted to give you an honest answer rather than, here's what I think you should do. This would be great. It's probably all the wrong stuff. Sorry.
Hannah.
Yeah.
What's the one lesson, one takeaway for college students in the room?
It would be that we need to invest our lives in new churches. And we either need to lead them, be a part of a team, or champion them and say you can do it. Because one day you're going to need a church for your grandchildren and your children. And one day you're going to be praying for a church that would be awesome for your friend that doesn't know Jesus but lives in Jacksonville, Florida. And you start praying like crazy, Lord, let there be a great church for that person. So that'd be the
Good.
thing.
Would you just pray for all
Yeah.
of us as we kind of digest this and continue to pursue our ministry dreams? That'd be great.
Right on.
Thanks.
Let's old school it. Let's stand up. Let's hold hands around your table, if you would, please. We'll do that for you guys. There. All right, let's pray. Jesus, I'm so thankful for, Lord, this time to be able to talk about your church, Father. I pray that, Lord, this information would be of encouragement, it would be of clarifying, and it would be of really, Lord, just maybe opening up for afresh, Lord, how that we could be a part of seeing your kingdom expand through a new church. God, we know that the church is your plan A and there is no plan B. And so, God, help us to be people who carry that torch high. Thank you for these students, Lord. Let them make the most of this time together in this institution, Lord. Use them in a powerful way for your kingdom's sake. Lord, not about us. It's more about you. You're the best. Amen.
Thank you. Let's thank Justin one more time.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah. We'll be back in 2 weeks with David Kinnan, and we'll see you then.
Right on.